Hello everyone, and welcome to another week of the Ubuntu community team Q&A. This week I'm joined by just David Kalle from the Ubuntu community team. I'm David Planella. I manage the community team at Canonical, and we've got a very, very special guest today. We've got Kevin Gunn, who manages the Ubuntu Unity Mir team and Mir teams. And he's here to answer all of your questions about related to those technologies, to Convergence in general, and for those of you who are new to these Q&As, the way it works is you can follow the video feed on ubuntuonair.com. And there you'll find a chat widget where you can either join the IRC channel or ask your questions directly in there. When you ask your questions, we'll just go through all of them in sequence, essentially, and we'll try to cover all of them. Remember, when you're asking one of them, to prevent them with the word question so that we can see them and we can essentially pick them from the chat on IRC. Remember to follow the Ubuntu On Air channels on Facebook, on Google Plus, on the YouTube channel as well. And I think without further ado, if while we're speaking, someone can confirm on IRC as the weekly ritual that we're talking to you guys and you can hear us and not just doing a monologue with ourselves. That'd be good.
Stream working, yep.
Excellent. All right. Okay, then I think I'll just hand it over to Kevin, who will explain a bit what he's doing, what their team are doing, what they're building, and then we can start taking questions.
Sure. So I guess there's been a couple of posts recently which probably highlight what we're doing, focusing on convergence primarily for both the Mir and the Unity8 team. That's really the feature development focus, as well as continuing to polish and build in optimizations for the products that we have. I was just having a conversation on Google Plus with someone in a post yesterday, and one thing that's really been on my heart lately in terms of development and feature development is that we're going a little bit slower now because we are actually shipping phones. Unity8 and Mir both are core to our mobile devices that are out in the market. And so it's critical for us as we develop features. We are building on top of our code base, and we have to make sure that we don't break our current code base. So we are only allowed to make it better, even with introducing new features, which is challenging sometimes. So there's that. The convergence activity that we've got going on right now, it revolves mainly around Unity8 and how to handle the various window states and that sort of thing, and I'm sure you've seen that. We're working through detailed issues around multi-monitor support and trying to land that. Trying to think back, I probably let it out into the public space that we had this particular PPA, Silo 0 as we were calling it, that was available. It's something that people could grab. Maybe a small update on that is that that's completely broken right now, and we're not going to fix it. And we're doing that on purpose in order to create enough pain for ourselves to do the right thing. So we're in the process of actually moving every bit of code that we want, out of there, getting it cleaned up and landing it into our image so that we can just abandon that PPA, that we don't have to rely on that anymore, and that every feature that we want will actually be just in the image and part of our standard Ubuntu Touch image that we're releasing. So that's slowly happening, and I expect that to happen really soon, actually. What else might we say? I guess that's it for right now. I'll let people ask questions. Hopefully that's enough to prime the pump on questions.
Excellent.
Should I just start reading, David, or?
Yeah, I can take them, or you can take them,
Sure.
whichever way.
I'll take the first one here. What's the status of non-Intel drivers for Mir Unity 8? I have a really bad time running Unity 8 on AMD and NVIDIA. Yeah, not completely surprising. So this is something that we do talk to our partners in the industry, and they are working themselves to support the open source model that we rely on, right? So KMS, EGL interfaces, and that we know from talking with them that work is ongoing. I can't say much more than that, right? Because that's their space, and I don't want to be inappropriate. But they are working on it, so we expect that over time that will become a better story, and you'll see drivers that do actually integrate and support Mir. Next question. How will the Ubuntu store look and work with all the snappy apps in it for different devices like phone, desktop, Mycroft, robots, fridges, etc.? That one I'll have to punt. I don't really know. Maybe David or the Davids might know.
I think we might be able to tell you something, but I think for the full story, you might need to wait for another guest from the store team. Essentially, right now we've got, as you guys know, we've got two different stores on the desktop space. We've got the software store. We've got the software center, whereas for the phone and Snappy, we've got the Ubuntu store. And actually, you already see how the store looks like in the sense for different targets. I mean, right now we've got Snappy apps available on the store. We've got Click apps available on the store, and for the phone itself, we will be migrating all of those Click applications to be Snappy applications as we move the whole technology on the phone side of things. So essentially, there will be only one store, which will eventually also power the Ubuntu personal images on the desktop. In terms of how the applications will look like for I'll call them third-party projects or OEMs. Micro, for example, you're mentioning robots, fridges. Right now, I'm not really involved in that discussion. So perhaps what we can do is to re-ask the question on another Q&A, or we can follow up on the Ubuntu app developers Google Plus discussion, and then talk to someone like Martin Albisetti, who's leading the online services team, who are responsible for implementing the store.
Okay, next one's probably for you again. Is it possible to develop apps for Ubuntu Phone on other Ubuntu-based distros like Ubuntu Mate, Lubuntu, Kubuntu, Zubuntu?
So you can always develop applications on those other distros. However, I think there's still a dependency on Unity for the developer tools. I'd have to check, to be honest, because I'm not 100% sure at the moment. I know that when we first released the Ubuntu SDK, it was we had the requirement for some Unity libraries to be in there. I think we might still have that requirement. So while you will be able to write applications on those distros, you might not be able to get them to run.
And the next one is Raspberry Pi got official touchscreen display. What about Ubuntu Touch support for Raspberry Pi 2? It'd be great, I think. I'm not directly involved with that area, but I would assume that once we have an input stack there working, that it would just work. I don't know.
Yeah, and there's quite a lot of work going on right now on Raspberry Pi. There's quite a lot of interest. I know that there's some, you've seen it on the recent campaigns on Kickstarter, on Indigo. There's quite a lot of projects which are using Raspberry Pi as their hardware foundation. And also quite a lot of them are using Snappy as the software foundation to run on those Raspberry boards. So this interest has also prompted well, has sped up a bit the process of upstreaming the Raspberry Pi kernel so that it's accepted in mainline. So part of the work, or part of the reason why we're still not yet there, it's because there's still a bit of work in upstreaming, and as Kevin was saying as well, there's some work required as well on the input stack.
Right, and then there's a question: how do I install Ubuntu Snappy Personal on a spare partition? The image doesn't appear to have an installer. Right, and my understanding is that right now it does not support partition installs. It takes over the entire disk, so that's a feature that would have to be worked on and added. Small note on that. I mean, we did some work. And there's a post out there about the personal image that you could put on the desktop, and we added that functionality to the UDF tool, but that is really an experimental. It's in an experimental state. It's not really meant to be used regularly, and there's not a lot of focus on that at the moment. Next question is, can you maybe talk a bit about testing and QA of Mir in Unity 8 and how it changed over time and how good things are working nowadays? Yeah, I sometimes I get the feeling that maybe the QA story of Canonical sort of maybe predated me a little bit about the time I joined the company. Things were, there was really a heavy focus on having a good testing story when I came on board, and so I can say that almost every project that I know of has a real test development mentality and building in tests as part of or before a feature is even delivered. And we've seen the benefits of that. I would probably highlight Mir specifically as being kind of a poster child for test-driven development. We all expected Mir to have it is a core piece, a fundamental piece of the stack, and we expected it to be maybe more risky than others whenever we would make updates and that sort of thing. And it's funny, as I look back over the evolution of the Ubuntu image for touch, Mir's actually been one of the more stable projects we've had, and it's actually had, I can't say we've never been the center of attention for a bug, but they've been very few and far between, and I do think that's a good testimony to that philosophy and how things were developed. And then as far as our continued efforts there, we are very focused on making sure that, and I can say this across every team is really focused on making sure that once we get to the point where we're trying to land something in the image, we have pretty high confidence from just engineering team testing that it's going to be safe and okay. And then of course our QA colleagues do a really good job of making sure to go back through and look at things that we don't even think have been touched or should be impacted by whatever it was we delivered. And I'm happy to report too that we have a very low instance of our QA colleagues finding things. So that's been, it's been really good confirmation to our engineering team practices that we're seeing that come through. The next question is, can you explain timeline and steps that will eventually give me a stable Unity 8 based desktop on which I can use all my current programs. I've been committed to always running the default desktop 6-month releases. How will my life evolve over the next few years? Right. So one thing I think we had when I first came on board, there was quite a bit of what I would, aggression, right? Like we were trying to be aggressive in terms of getting Unity 8 out there, and I think over time that maybe that philosophy changed a little bit, and we, looking back at history, and you go back to the Unity 7, the 3D evolution that happened, and there was a lot of pushback on that, and I think that people felt like that probably went out the door before it was ready. And so I think what we've done is listened to people and looked at our own history there and said, hey, we don't want to push this out before it's ready, and there's a fair amount of polish to go. And obviously we're back to what I said in the beginning, we're supporting phones, and we continue to deliver features for phones in the meantime, and all of this is being built on one code base. And it's kind of funny, right? If you look at the industry, I mean, Microsoft has only recently done this, and even Apple has only recently done this, and there's a reason. It's hard. Actually, it turns out it's really hard to keep your flow going and keep all your products delivering on one code base while not breaking things, and expanding that across not only a bunch of different mobile devices, but then add to that, okay, now we're going to bring in desktop, which is a completely different form factor, or tablets, or whatever the form factor is. And so I think that is the real challenge, right? And I think that is one reason we've maybe backed off of some of our original claims. All that to say is, I think that our hopes would be that when we get past 1604 is when we can start to really introduce the Unity 8 desktop. I think you'll see things in the marketplace, possibly even before then, that might highlight that, or bring in some of those features, right? If you look at the posts going on, you can sort of maybe read the tea leaves a little bit about what's happening, but yeah, I think post 1604 you should see one other 1604 Unity 7, really solid release, and then after that, then it's time for our Convergence to move over at that point. At least that's our hope, right? And if we sort of stay the course and we keep delivering things, and like the question about our testing and our QA, if we keep our quality up, then we should be at that point where we feel confident where we can roll that out to people. And hopefully that answers that question. And I think that even with some of these features that you're seeing with the Unity 8 and windowed mode, running on the tablet, I mean, obviously once you have it on a big screen, there's nothing keeping you from using that app in that fashion, right? So it's sort of up to you. Connect a keyboard, connect a mouse, and off you go. See, next question. Will you consider to officially support Ubuntu Touch on Nexus 5 in the future, since Nexus 4 is getting pretty old? That's a great question, and I kind of agree. Or it's something that I've thought about recently, and we haven't actively picked up a discussion inside Canonical about that. I think it's one we might want to have, and there's all kinds of factors that go into that, right? Outfitting everybody with a new phone and having to move all of your reference materials off of one device onto another. That's pretty challenging, and so I think the pressure to do that is going to have to be pretty great. So far, Nexus 4 has been really good in terms of it being a reference device. And there is an upside in that it's old, in that you get really stable drivers and really stable kernel pieces to it. You get a little bit maybe slower processing, which is good in a way, right? Because that'll sort of push on and press on some of our performance issues that we have and that we want to tackle. And so from that perspective, it can be a good thing. But I do realize, there is the desire of people out there running around with, Ubuntu on their phones. It's like, hey, I have this cool Nexus 5. Why can't you guys support it here? I get that too. But I think it's something that we need to talk about internally and figure that out. You know, what the costs are, and then does it make sense for us to do that?
Yeah, and the one thing to add in here as well is that you have to remember as well that the port to Nexus 5 is available and brought to you from a community member. So I mean, kudos to him for having worked through the pain that it was at the beginning to do porting and to continue delivering images for the Nexus 5. So good work there.
Yeah, I'd like to outline the fact that the Nexus 5 port is working great. I'm using it daily, and as long as you stick to stable images, it's excellent.
Cool. All right, what do we have next? I think the next one is also for you, Kevin. We've got Happy Frog is asking, how does one install and test Unity 8?
That's sort of I guess I'd have to ask the question back, you know, where do you want to install and test it? So we obviously have our devices that we support as reference devices, right? So there's the Nexus 4, there's the Nexus 7 2013, and an unloved device right now, which, you know, nobody's been working on, is the Nexus 10. We've had support for that in the past. And then, of course, we've got our devices that are you know, being sold, right? So there's the BQ and the Meizu device that are available. So there's that, and then the, you know, if you're hinting at, well, I want to test it on desktop, we still have the desktop session. So it's Unity8 desktop session Mir is the actual name of the install. And once you install that, if you go out to the greeter, there's this little Ubuntu logo right next to your password entry that you can toggle on to get to Unity8. And then you can boot into a Unity8 session there that way. Maybe after we finish the video, we'll post some links to instructions to that. I'm sure there's some still around. Or if one of you guys has it handy, that'd be great. The next one is
one thing that we might want to do is at some point post these instructions on unity.ubuntu.com, where we have, I think we've got some instructions already, but I'm not sure how up to date they are. Anyway, I'm going to post the unity.ubuntu.com link.
Yeah, they should be pretty accurate. It hasn't changed in quite some time. The Unity 8 preview that was made part of the release was done for let's see, 14.10, I guess, or might have even been 14.04. But that hasn't changed since then. Once you install that package, you get everything. There were some bugs early on having to do with logging in and logging out, and I know that it was much easier just to create a second user and just have your second user associated with Unity 8. It made it easy to toggle, and I still have that set up here, and it works. Cool. Next question. Someone would like to ask if we are developing Ubuntu Touch for Samsung smartphones. Right now, it is available on very limited devices, and they think Ubuntu can have a fair chance to compete with Cyanogen on an alternate operating system on smartphones. You know, I think one thing we would have to say, right, is I don't think we would ever publicly discuss whether or not we were working on any particular OEM device. So I'll just have to leave that one. But thanks for the comment that we have a competitive product. Next question: is there still work ongoing to add libinput support to Mir? Yes, there is actually. So that's been something that we've been working on. We're trying to abandon some of the Android input stack, and so there was work done where we ported in some of the missing features out of libinput, upstream those. So we'll be taking that on soon. And again, that's really just kind of hinging on libinput upstream guys landing the patches we need. Question, any news on the work on getting proxy and WPA2 enterprise working on Ubuntu Touch? I don't know if you guys might know that one. I have no idea.
I was just looking for the bug on Launchpad to see if it was fixed. I thought it WPA support had been added, but I cannot really confirm. Do you happen to know, David?
I think that WPA2 is enabled. I don't think there is a UI for proxy settings. Maybe I'm wrong about WPA, but
we can have a look at to see if we can. I mean, if who did ask the question? I mean, if you can show us the bugs that you're talking about, then we can see whether they are matched on for the next OTA or whether they've been fixed. I myself I'm not a user of WPA Enterprise, so I cannot really tell you, and I haven't been following it up closely. All right. The next question is again from the Happy Frog. There are a lot of games are made in SDL, SDL2. Are there plans to help those devs to easily port the games to Ubuntu Phone? Maybe official SDL templates in the SDK. Oh, funny you're asking. We have exactly that. I know that some community members have been working on SDL templates in GitHub, and I think right now we're at the process of testing them. I think before they get added to the SDK, they need to have like wider testing. They need to be proven to be useful, and then in terms of the libraries and in terms of porting, it all depends on how good the support is for SDL itself. I myself I'm not really up to date on the status of APIs. I think in the past you had to install a package to be able to develop, but I'm not sure if that's still the case. Do you happen to know, Kevin or David?
I don't know.
We can perhaps follow up then later on IRC. All right, and I think the next one is for you, Kevin. Well, we can take it in the context of the work that you guys do with Unity. How is the work with the design team? Do you only code what they give you, or do you design something for yourself and then show it to the design team what you came up with?
Yeah. As you can imagine, it's an iterative process, and you know, there are smaller questions where we feel comfortable, and a lot of times we'll just answer the question and get their approval and show them what we did. And sometimes it's just to fill the gap, right? Sometimes we identify, hey, there's a user experience gap here, right, or a design issue here, and we need something short term, and then we'll do something and put it in place, and then let them think about it over the long haul, and they'll frequently come back and say, okay, well, you know, user testing didn't do very well on this. Let's change it in these ways, X, Y, Z, whatever those are. And then frequently there are bigger, sort of larger topic items that they look at over a longer period that we sort of follow them and we give them feedback, and they'll ask us, you know, how difficult this is, or you know, what are your thoughts on this? And so we'll share, you know, input back to them about, you know, potential performance pitfalls or things like that. And so it is a collaborative process, but yeah, they ultimately own the user experience and the design. So, you know, at the end of the day, they say what is good and what is not, and what goes in and what does not. So the next question, any plans for Ubuntu Game Center? I probably have the best score in Fall Down Game. Nobody can see it. Maybe a simple API so you can send scores using Ubuntu One. Yeah, that I don't know.
I'd say first of all that's a great idea, but I think there's one idea that probably needs discussion. this is the first time that I've heard it, but perhaps you already started discussing it with someone else. I think what I would do is to encourage you to perhaps flesh out this idea and propose it to the community. One good place to do this is, for example, is on the Ubuntu Developers Google Plus account, where you get the mixture of technical people who know about the phone and know about developing apps for the phone. And I think there you might get some input on how we could do this and whether it makes sense or not. So that'd be my my suggestion. But yeah, great idea. All right. The next question is from Peter Bittner. What percentage of Canonical is working or are focused on Ubuntu Touch? Just to give us a feeling. It's a bit of a tricky question. I mean, I'd have to count myself, but I don't know. I'm concerned of giving just a figure right now to be quoted somewhere, and it being wrong. I mean, yeah. The thing to bear in mind as well is that what we tend to do in Canonical is to focus on one product, and then sometimes the resources need to be allocated to another one. So right now there's been quite a lot of cross-team collaboration between Ubuntu Touch and Snappy. I mean, some of the skills for those guys in the foundations working on the foundations of the Ubuntu Phone. I've been very good at doing the implementation and design and discussion on Snappy. So right now I cannot really tell you a number, but it's not a small figure, I would say. I'm not sure if Kevin, you've got any thoughts on this one?
No, I thought the same thing when you read it. I thought, I don't even know. I wouldn't even venture to guess. I would probably be wrong if I guessed.
Yeah, perhaps you can re-ask the question next week to Pat McGowan, who's leading the engineering teams for the phone and developer experience, and he might be able to give you a more accurate answer. All right. What's next? I think the next question is from Le Happy Frog again. Is there any support for gamepads in QML? I want to code a simple QML app that uses the gamepad in QML. I'd need to Google on that to be honest, but my experience has been that whenever I've wanted to do something in QML, there's something available, either as part of the Qt upstream libraries or as part of something that someone has created in GitHub. David, you're perhaps more up to date in terms of QML development. Have you seen anything like that?
I'm just looking into it, and apparently there is a Qt gamepad library
There you go.
that you can export to QML. I found a great tutorial, but unfortunately it's in French.
No problem for you.
Yep. But that could be the topic of a new tutorial on developer.ubuntu.com. So I'm not going to say stay tuned for that, but that could be a good topic. But yeah, look for it. There is a Qt gamepad library you can use.
Excellent. All right. Yeah. Perhaps you can paste a link on the channel. They might be then able to look for themselves, and if they are friends from what I can see in the nickname, perhaps they are able to follow the tutorial as well. Or that's always Google Translate. Okay. So next question is again from Le Happy Frog. I've seen so many people running Ubuntu Unity 7 on Surface, NVIDIA Shield, random Chinese Intel tablets. When will they be able to run Unity 8 on them? I think that's another one for you, Kevin.
Yeah, that's I guess I would say in what context, right? If it's the Ubuntu Touch mobile form factor approach, I mean that could be done today, right? If you have the port available, there wouldn't be anything stopping you. Obviously, Unity 8 in a desktop mode is still under development. There's nothing that would prevent you from doing that either, as far as I know. The way Mir works, and I don't know how many people listening might know or might not know, but Mir has basically can run on either Android graphics or on Mesa graphics. So if the chipset in the base port has one of those in there, from a graphics standpoint, it's fine. It'll quote unquote just work, as long as someone's done all the work around all the other bits that don't necessarily fall in our bucket. So there's really, it's not a stretch, right? It's not a huge leap to show that. I think we actually demonstrated an Intel tablet last Mobile World Congress, if I'm not mistaken, with Unity 8 running on it. So it's been done.
All right. So Kevin, I've got a question for you now that you're mentioning Mir. So in terms of porting or making Mir work to in other hardware, how flexible it is from the side of. So let me just go back a bit. So essentially, what you're saying is that most of the work required is to do the enablement on hardware. Essentially, Mir, once this enablement is done, is pretty flexible to run on different hardware, right?
Right. Yeah, we've seen other devices. We've enabled, new devices to us where we just get a base port, and maybe say a vendor has had Android running on it. We've done bring ups as quickly as 2 weeks, and it's usually just some, build it, throw it on there, and test it, and did it work? There's kind of a process that we go through where we, we'll run the basic Mir integration test to see if those work, and we'll use a Mir demo server to make sure that the graphics stack's okay. Once that's there, plop Unity 8 on top, and you're off, and you're running. So we've seen that a few times.
Excellent. All right. Okay, so it seems right now we don't have any more questions. Remember, if you want to ask anything, Kevin or ourselves, about anything related to Ubuntu, Unity, Convergence, /Mir, anything, remember to prepend your question with question, and we can then go through them. I've got another question, actually. We've seen a couple of videos being posted on the Ubuntu developers channel, and I know that you and your team have been responsible for that. They've generated quite a lot of interest and quite a lot of excitement, and two of the things that we've seen have been X apps running in a confined setting. While it's not the final piece of work, this is something that folks are getting really excited about. Could you tell us what it involved to enable X apps to run on this new Mir Unity 8 world in a secure way?
Sure, I'll do my best, and I know Stephen Webb is on IRC as well, so he can chime in and correct me if I misspeak. But if people remember, or if you've been following for a while, we had this particular project called XMirror. This was like right after I got hired, and the original thought was, well, what if we could actually make Mir part of the desktop release, right? What would that would we get some benefit and some bang for our buck out of that if we did that? So we put in some work to have basically you could have the entire X stack run on top of Mir, and Mir would act as the system compositor, right? Because on your desktop today, you don't I mean, your system compositor is the X compositor, but it's also your session compositor, right? So you can't really. That's why you get this hard switch coming out of your greeter at the moment, right? There's no way we can do like these nice transitions and this sort of thing. That work was done some time ago, and it's something that we've maintained over time, and it's helped us to do some of this work. We took XMirror, and now what we've done is we're using that to support these X apps. So you'll have an X app, LibreOffice, gedit, whatever it may be, and then we'll run those on top of an XMirror instance, and then that pipes its way out to Mir, obviously, actually, and then what you're seeing basically is an just to the rest of the system, it's just a Unity 8 window. It doesn't know any better, right? It doesn't know what's in there, but what's in that window is an entire X environment, drawing and running. I think the video I took that video with my cell phone, and I think at the moment when I had taken that video, we hadn't quite enabled window management, so it may have been limited. But I know just after that, we turned on Compass inside of there, and we had like full window management immediately as well. That's how it's built, and it is inside of a container. So all the apps are inside of a container, and there's lots of work going on around that to be able to launch this as part of your Unity 8 experience. And we do want it to be, we know that there are people that are going to want their favorite X app to work on Unity 8, and at the same time, we can't invest every bit of our blood, sweat, and tears into making it work completely cleanly, because that would do a disservice to Unity 8 as well, right? So the idea is to give people enough support and let things run, but not so well enough that there isn't some kind of incentive and motivation to eventually, move those over and move your life over to Unity 8 to have native Unity 8 ports of those in some fashion. Hopefully that explained it. I don't know if I did a decent job. Does that answer it, David? Or?
It answered my question very well. And one thing that I'll add, perhaps not directly related to the question, but you mentioning perhaps X apps. Not every single of the 15,000 apps in the store being perfectly supported on Mir, and this meaning an incentive for people to port them and to make them work and to polish them. For those who want to use those apps and don't have the option, or they don't have the intention to move to a Unity 8 based desktop, there's always the or there will always be the Ubuntu distribution as we know it right now. So that will still be an option.
And I do think the Libertine tools that we have, so Libertine is the name of the tool set around this XApp support that Stephen Webb has been working on, and that will exist for plenty of time for people to operate within that X world. And one thing we found, or some of the feedback that we've discovered, is that there's a lot of X applications that require maybe a special extension or something that is non-obvious, right? Or they use maybe some sort of direct path into X that's unusual, and so for those things, those are going to be the ones that we're going to need to, if someone has a beloved app that's doing that, and it's important enough, and there's enough users of it, and there's enough pull for it, we can solve those problems over time, right? I mean, it's not like we're going to say no, hell no, we're not going to talk to you about your, whatever app or extension you need, right? But there does have to be enough of a pull and a need for it by the community and the market for that to happen. Yeah.
Okay, so in the meantime, we've had a couple of other questions. We've got about 15 minutes. I think what I'll do to make sure that we've got time if other questions come up is I'll pick the ones that are perhaps more related to Mir in this case, so that we can make the most of our time with Kevin here. So Happy Frog is asking, is it possible to copy paste from XMirror to a QML app?
That is something that we're working on. It is not yet, but we do have a plan, and it's something that we have an architecture fleshed out between a couple of different teams within Canonical that are working on that, and so that will be something that will be possible in the future.
Okay. Next question, again from the Happy Frog. Any plans for a Snappy-based x86 tablet that can run Steam? Basically, I want a tablet that I can use as a gaming console with a gamepad on Bluetooth. How well does XMirror perform? Like running Dota 2? There's quite a lot of mixture of technology.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a mix in there, right? I think I would cut out the snappy part of that. So, you know, the personal image is, I mean, you can think of it, there is already a personal image today. It's the phone image. I mean, there's really no difference, right? We're talking about a single code base. And so in the future, there just won't be any difference. It's the same thing. And then about the gaming console with Bluetooth, how well does XMirror perform? Okay, I'll try to take the XMirror performance. So we did some performance measurements a long time ago, back when we were looking at actually releasing XMirror as part of the desktop platform. By the way, that we got really close. The only reason we held it out was we struggled to solve all of our multi-monitor bugs, right? That was actually the thing that ended up really killing us. Performance wasn't an issue at all. I think it was, if I recall correctly, and I'd be hard-pressed to like pull out numbers and everything, but I want to say it was like a no-hit. I mean, it was just because we had enabled bypass, right, for anything that's full screen, so you didn't really do like real compositing. So the only time that you would hit you know, an additional processing point would be if you did some clever feature where you were blending the lock screen with the user sessions and did something like that. And our design team does talk about those kinds of things, so they're not completely unrealistic, and they haven't, you know, it's just not something that we're focused on because we're not there yet, but it could. But yeah, XMirror in terms of raw performance hit and the way that we use it is, you know, nothing really. Because it's not really doing much compositing. Let's see, what was the last part of that question? The Dota 2 part. So Dota 2, as far as I know, would be, I mean, if we have SDL support on top of Mir, then you wouldn't need to run it in an XApp potentially. I don't know. I see Steven's on there answering questions, so maybe he's handling that. Yeah, so Steven's saying it runs great on XMirror. Yeah.
Okay. Next question is from AMP. How is it different to run legacy X11 apps on X11 Unity 7 and running them on X/Mir/Unity8 security-wise? How are the apps is isolated? How do you compare the protection level from proprietary apps? For example, spying on my personal data from file system, other apps, etc. on Unity 7 and Mir Unity 8.
Right. So, you know, this is, you'll probably see I'm not a real expert on you know, Linux security, but in my mind, they're actually more secure because they are running inside of a container, right? So the X application support that we have planned, you can't really get out of your container. And you might say, well, what about copy-paste? Well, even copy-paste is going to be arbitrated through a component we call Content Hub. Ubuntu Touch, and that will require some form of validation to make sure that the people who are saying, here I'm going to copy this piece of information into the Content Hub to share with you, and then the guy on the other side who's receiving that information or that data, he's also validated as someone who, he is who he says he is. So in that regard, I think apps running inside of the container on XMirror are even more secure, in my opinion.
Okay, and I think that's probably going to be our last question. At least that's the last one we've got on IRC. Peter Bittner is asking, could we have a on-air session with the Ubuntu design team to help better understand the design decisions and the roadmap we should expect? Well, yes, most definitely yes. I mean, you've probably seen it in recent Q&As. Rather than having the community team answering the questions, first of all, we found out that surprise, we're not experts in everything Ubuntu. So it's good to have the experts who have the domain knowledge of each one of the areas where there are questions, and also it's good to give essentially to get this conversation going with those who are working with these technologies. And the feedback that we've had so far is that the speakers have enjoyed it, and the community, those who are asking questions as well or watching the videos afterwards, have been enjoying it very much. I've seen a couple of comments already on IRC. Someone was saying this is the best Ubuntu on Air ever. Someone said we should invite Kevin more often. So so it seems that this is something that's very, very appreciated. So yeah, to answer with the summary, yes, we've got a list of speakers that we want to invite, and the design team is definitely on that list. And also we welcome any suggestions that you guys have. If you think it would be interesting to invite a particular person in, either a canonical employee or a community or a volunteer community developer, translator, whichever way they're contributing to Ubuntu, just let us know on IRC. On the Ubuntu on Air channel, we're always in there, or we are on Ubuntu-community-team DPM, and we've got lots of other folks in there who can see our suggestions. All right, I think we've covered quite a lot of content. I have got another question myself for Kevin. And it's again related to the sneak previews that we've been sharing on the as videos. So the next step in the Ubuntu personal / Convergence story is essentially the road to Convergence. We've seen that applications, or we've seen demos where you can connect devices already to a monitor, and that you can run applications in there as if it were well, just you're taking the desktop with yourself. What are the big rocks in Convergence right now, from your point of view? What are the major Convergence stories that you're planning to tackle next?
So one item which we're working on right now. So obviously, once we get our multi-monitor code landed in part of the image, one thing that we're going to work on is, at the moment, if you plug in your device to a monitor, you'll get a mirrored mode. But we do actually have the ability to do disparate displays, and so that's going to be one thing that we tackle. And we will, there was some little bit of discussion out on the post about that. We'll take baby steps. The first thing that we'll do is probably just some kind of billboardy thing, something very simple, so that you're, that you're working in your monitor, you're not on your phone anymore. And then we'll evolve that hopefully to something that is maybe a bespoke kind of phone UI, that when you're in this mode, maybe there's some controls or some special navigational elements that happen. We've talked about maybe media controls. If you're playing a movie, maybe you should switch and have some kind of VCR controls that show up on your phone, or have a soft keyboard maybe is another option. And again, this is just kind of riffing, right? This is exactly where we're at, talking about these sort of things. So that's one item. And then the other thing that we need to do is to make sure that we get good feature parity with some of the things that are already on desktop. Like I know one of the guys on our team, he's already put some work in on making sure that all the hotkeys work like the way you think they would, right? So when you get into a spread, you can do Alt-Tab and you can just flip between the apps. So things like that are coming along. What else? That's it, really. That's all that comes to mind anyway at the moment. We already have quite a bit of functionality. I mean, the Windows they remember where they were the next time you reboot. So if you plug it in, and they'll just show up where they were, which I think is so cool, right? Because that's like we already have some level of true window management. Oh, I guess menu support, right? That's the other one that's maybe a big rock that's coming along that we're working on, so that Bill Fuller's team, right, the apps team, as they develop things, that as they move into the desktop world, they'll have the ability to have drop-down menus and deeper cuts into the menuing scheme. What else? Another thing that we haven't paid a lot of attention to, but is something that the design team's given us some feedback for, and the priority of it's going to kind of depend on maybe interest and that sort of thing. But we have this concept called side stage for certain apps that are really built to be on a phone. Like somebody built it and it works great on a phone, but they didn't really intend for it to be used on a desktop necessarily, but something that would just reside in that side panel. That's kind of a big rock. We need to go back and do some cleanup work around that. I think what else? And then maybe it's not necessarily a convergence or a desktop focused big rock, but there's been a lot of work done around what we call Slim Greeter, and the guy who works on it, his name is Josh Aronson. He's gonna post a blog pretty soon about that, because he's gotten to the point where he's gotten far enough and kind of gotten enough under his belt that he's going to do a write-up on that. And so there's two things there. One is he's going to take the Unity 8 greeter, and we're going to propose that to Will's team to see if we can't use the Unity 8 greeter as the greeter for the desktop, right? So one thing people may not know is that all the indicators are the same indicators, whether it's on desktop or phone today, right? So there's already a lot of code sharing going on, and so this will be another one of those, right? This will be another step towards that, and making sure that we're, using what we're producing on the desktop as far as we can. And then the second thing that will allow us to do, there's some features that will come out of that. So I mentioned earlier, like being able to blend things and do kind of cool visual effects with the Slim Greeter. We'll be able to do that, and then as well we'll be able to support like launching apps while the phone is locked, right? So very similar to maybe an iPhone experience where you have, you can launch your camera and take a picture for that Kodak moment. You can't necessarily get to the picture until you unlock it as the user and go get it, but enabling some of those apps to have the ability to be used on the other side of the greeter. So that's another one. And then, I guess maybe it's obvious, we talked a little bit about copy and paste, but I think there's another evolution that we would, as we get that feature nailed down, there's also a drag and drop consideration. So that's another feature that we're thinking about and marinating on. How do we do that between an old X app inside of a Unity 8 world, and can we do that where you might want to drag and drop a picture, or, a block of text or something like that.
wow, you guys are, well, busy.
Yeah. We have plenty to do, let's put it that way. Plenty.
David, do we have time for last question?
Yes, let's take, since we started a couple of minutes after, let's just take the last question. I'm hoping it's not like a long one. All right.
Okay, Kevin, do you know how will scopes work on the Unity8 desktop? If they will be in their own separate window, if they will be the background, if they will be on the side stage?
Oh, scopes in general? Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Yeah, so when you're looking at, when you first plug in the device and you see your app window, when I see you plug it in, you plug it into a monitor and it goes into the windowed mode and you see the apps window, or what everyone's calling the apps window. That's just the app scope, and it operates the same way. I'll just say that the design team is still doing a lot of work around user experience testing with scopes, and they're trying to come up with, what does that mean in a desktop world. So I'm not sure how exactly it will look in the end, but absolutely there's nothing stopping scopes from just working the same way. There is some work to be done in terms of scope layouts for different sizes. I think to date they've all been implemented and done, sort of with a view on this is either going to be a phone or a tablet, not a big screen. And so there is some work that we'll have to catch up there. It's not a huge amount, but it's just accommodating a different size screen.
Okay, thanks.
All right, and I think with this, we need to wrap it up. It's been an hour of really, really interesting questions. So first of all, thanks everyone for joining us and for participating in the discussion. Then I'll say thanks a lot, Kevin, for coming and essentially rocking the Q&A. Thanks, David, for joining in as well as every week. And then I'll say we'll see each other next week on our weekly Q&A. We'll have another stellar guest. We'll be joined by Pat McCown. As I said before, he's leading the teams who are responsible for implementing the phone experience / developer experience, and I'm sure it will be another really exciting one. So with that, thanks everyone, and see you next week.
All right, bye.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, David.
Bye.